Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, here to have the first of a series of episodes that I really liked doing last year, and we're gonna continue the tradition this year by talking about two players at a time. Our expectations for the coming season, what would make a good season for that player, what would make a great season for that player. I've left that definition up to the individual guests. We're going to have a whole slew of different people doing these, so get a lot of different perspectives on these hopes for individual players and position groups, rather than just having position group shows. Anyway, joining me tonight to talk about the first two players is Josh Reed. How you doing, Josh?
I'm doing great, Ken.
Many times on the show now. You've probably done close to 20 pods on this show, I'm thinking. Last year, you mentioned you had Likely, and who was your other player?
Patrick Queen.
Okay, that's a good one. Nice, lively discussion about that, I bet. And this year, we're going to talk about Ben Cleveland and Justin Madubuike.
Yeah, two of the big boys, man. I love getting into trench warfare, especially two guys that could play pivotal roles for the Ravens this year.
Yeah, both very important players, I think, in the Ravens scheme. But let's go ahead and start with Ben Cleveland. And kind of a disappointing 2022. He came to camp overweight, having just got married, and the team did something they do not normally do, which is publish his higher weight level with the roster. As they had him published at 370 pounds, which is kind of a move that indicates to me they're trying to embarrass him about his conditioning. It took him several days before he's able to pass that conditioning test.
Yeah, that's something you really don't see, especially for like a team with such a young player. But if this is what it takes to kind of get the guy like, hey, get the literal sand out of your pants, and because it's crazy when you look at his physique, you're like, oh man, this is a mountain of a man, real chiseled. You think this guy's like always in shape, right? But all weight is all muscle isn't good muscle all the time, so you may see a big beefy dude, but if you can't move and meet those conditioning test marks, and in the Ravens it's like, or like, I wouldn't say notorious, but they're known for having one of the tougher conditioning tests in the entire league. So you gotta know what to expect coming into it, especially year two. It's not like you're a rookie and you don't know what you're going into. Your guy's been a year in the league and we're fighting for a starting job. So you thought you'd come into the second year ready to go. I don't think he'll have that problem this year around. I think the message got through, and there's no wedding excuse this time. I know people can, especially when you have the kind of resources that NFL players have, you can tend to overindulge yourself when you go on trips and stuff like that. So, I'm not cutting the guy no slack, because at the end of the day, you're a professional. But this time around, I don't think we'll have that problem with Ben Cleveland.
Yeah, I would agree. And reports from the off-season activities are that he has come in looking much more chiseled in terms of where he is. I'm sure Harbaugh is very happy about that. He certainly was very salty about what happened last year. In a lot of ways, Cleveland is Harbaugh's guy. As I recall it on draft night, he's one of the players. Duvernay was another one of Harbaugh's guys, but he has some specific second and third round guys that DaCosta seems to be willing to let him have an elevated say in, we'll say. That seems to be where a lot of these guys get drafted. And Cleveland is a guy who, I think Harbaugh was very excited to get, and obviously very disappointed with the way last year started out. His situation didn't get any easier, because while he was supposed to be fighting for a left guard job, in fact, one he might have taken, Ben Powers then went off and had one hell of a season.
Yeah, it's one of those, like, whenever you see the people on ESPN talking about the Ravens, even dating back to last year when they were doing their projected depth charts, it was always Ben Cleveland just automatically penciled in at left guard. Now, while they have him penciled in there, like, the Ravens they aren't going to give any jobs away. They don't care where you got drafted or how much you're getting paid. They're going to play the best starting five, whether it's the guy they're paying 20-something million to, and Ronnie Stanley, which is, he is the best and works the hardest, so you don't got to worry about that. Or, like, they don't care if you got drafted, in the third round just a year ago or a year or two ago. If you get outplayed by a guy who's entering the fourth year of his contract, like a Ben Powers, or even a former undrafted free agent like a Patrick McCarry, then you're just going to get outplayed, and they're going to start that guy over you. And I really appreciate that, because you don't see that with all teams across the league. Some teams will keep riding the high drafted pedigree guys till the wheels fall off, literally. And I'm just glad the Ravens are one of those teams that they firmly believe in the best starting five is going to play, and that's what they do.
Right. In the case of Cleveland, his pedigree was not high enough that he should have been given the job ever. But I'm still a little surprised at the way Harbaugh talked about the 2023 camp battle, and he almost literally mentioned each of the other players in the race who are not an impressive group. Patrick McCary, who has his own issues with being a smaller finesse guard next to another finesse player like Linderbaum. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Daniel Faalele moving in from tackle already. First of all, it's really not exciting that Faalele is not staying at right tackle. Now, obviously, he didn't have a great rookie year by any stretch of the imagination, but you'd think they'd at least be projecting him there. But that's one of the first names they mentioned. They mentioned Simpson as being a guy who might move in and play guard. And then they finally mentioned Cleveland. Well, of those names, Cleveland is the obvious choice of, from where I'm sitting. And if it doesn't work out that way, okay. But say Ben Cleveland's going to have, his attempt to win this. And they say, but I would also figure Patrick McCary, Simpson, and Faalele all getting their shots during camp and the preseason. If they said it like that, no problem. But they said it basically inverted. That Cleveland is almost the afterthought name.
Yeah, and then what also kind of threw me for a loop was when he said that they've been working Ben Cleveland at right tackle, and I was like, okay, you know what? This is OTAs, and this is the time you kind of want to get guys experimenting, kind of like I wouldn't say because the equivalent to routes on air for receivers, right? For linemen during this time at this period of time, you kind of see this guy have the footwork to work this side of the line at this position. So like when you hear guys who are normally interior guys exclusively trying out a right tackle or a left tackle, you're like, that's kind of funny, but that's just the coaching staff kind of experimenting. This is the time of year to do it. Once mandatory minicamp and training camp comes, that's when the experimenting kind of has to subside. And you kind of have these guys rotating in with the ones and the twos, or even the threes, at the positions that you want them to be fighting for. So yeah. I didn't read too much into that, and having him at right experimenting with him at right tackle just because the Ravens love positional versatility among all their offensive linemen, and I know that they're working a bunch of guys at different spots. So like that kind of stuff doesn't bother me. But the fact that he's speaking more glowingly about John Simpson in particular and Faalele when it comes to his left guard competition, even dating back to the annual league meetings when he talked about, though, don't be surprised that he's going to surprise some people or some surprise candidates, stuff like that. And he just kept bringing those two guys up in particular. I'm not crazy about Faalele moving into guard. I just love him at right tackle. And like I know I know Jonathan Ogden played that 1 year at with the left guard before he moved to the left tackle. But for a guy who goes from career right tackle and is still relatively new to the game of football, like I'm not crazy about him moving inside. Granted, he's a big guy, and then he'll get that road grader label slapped on him. But I'd much rather him be groomed as a potential right tackle of the future than a left guard for now, especially if you have other candidates who are more natural at that position.
Yeah, it's a little bit like turning your starting pitcher prospects into relievers early in their career to move guys from tackle to guard at all. But you don't want your your tackles to be really swingmen who are really guards, but they'll play tackle in an emergency. That's not ideal at all. And I do think it makes a lot of sense to put a very big body next to Linderbaum. I think that you basically get an extra benefit from Linderbaum's quickness that you can really capitalize on if you have a massive man next to him. And the Ravens are potentially for the next 2 years could be in great shape on that. If Cleveland is the guy for years 3 and 4 of his contract, this year they'll have Zeitler again. Next year, I would project that Voorhees is going to be the starting right guard for the Ravens. If they don't have another big acquisition, another big draft pick at the position, I think he's the most natural one to come in. He'll have a 4-year period. He's an older rookie anyway. He's also, being delayed a year, probably on NFI for the entire year, which is going to relieve the Ravens with 4 years of eligibility or 4 years on the initial contract for him. So that's a potentially very exciting player that I think can come in, has the upper body strength to really be a right guard and the decent length to do that as well. So I really like what Voorhees brings to the table. And I think having Voorhees in Cleveland, on either side, bracketing Linderbaum is going to really help and really accentuate what Linderbaum can do for you on a football field.
Yeah, I'm super excited about Voorhees too, man. But if Cleveland doesn't really seize the opportunity, and even if he doesn't win the job, but like puts up a valiant effort in this, like if he doesn't, I mean, because they also got a guy, in Masala Amavai Leulu. Got that pronunciation. Yeah, because I know his uncle. So. Yeah. Big old Salah. I mean, he's a guy who's capable of playing right tackle and right guard too. So like, if Ben Cleveland doesn't kind of like doesn't prove his pedigree, but like show that the Ravens that he can be a quality starter, if not premier primary backup. And this is a guy who a year who knows how. Like, I mean, Joe D really seems to be fond of Salah. Who knows how quickly that guy can develop a year from now? And you could be like, if they don't bring back Zeitler, then he could be in a fight again this time next year for the right guard position, or the left guard position. I don't know which side they're gonna play Voorhees on, because I know he played both left and right guard in college. So he's a guy that, like I said, if Cleveland doesn't show up this training camp, he's a guy that could be in jeopardy. If he could be he could be the next Ben Powers, as far as a guy goes into year 4 as a potential bubble guy, and then maybe that might be the final kick in the ass that he needs to not to turn his career around, but like really realize his potential.
Yeah, I agree. And if we look back in terms of how I graded him, let's start with that. For Pittsburgh, against Pittsburgh, he just played a few snaps. I think it was 14 in week 14. He gave up 2/3 of a sack in that game. Had some incredible run blocking snaps, some great double teams set up by Linderbaum or with Linderbaum, where he moved the man like exactly what we hoped we were getting with Ben Cleveland. And we just that game's run blocking alone. He had some pass blocking mistakes, including 2/3 of a sack allowed in that game as I scored it, but looked fantastic as a run blocker if you want to look back at that game. Then he had that very solid week 18 start at Cincinnati. Played the whole game. He might have missed a snap or two, but he basically played the whole game. Graded out as a solid C by my system. I think PFF had him graded reasonably well on that game as well. Then gave up 2/3 of a quarterback hit in only 3 snaps in the wild card loss. So didn't really get another chance in the playoffs to stick it at left guard. You wouldn't expect it because Powers obviously was coming back at that point. But anyway, very little to go on in total. That one start, pretty good. There's certainly flashes against Pittsburgh, but boy, that's you wish he had kind of more to go on out of his second season after really getting a bigger trial in his first year.
Yeah, he was rotating with Ben Powers as a rookie. And the thing about Cleveland, man, is like the flashes that he puts on tape, especially when it comes to run blocking, are brilliant. They're beautiful. They kind of suck you in. I'm like, man, this guy could really be something. But like I said, I'm not at the facility. I'm not part of the team. But like it seems to me that Harbaugh is really a big practice guy. If you're not a guy that shows out in practice, you're not going to see the field on Sundays. So if Ben Cleveland can translate what take those flashes that he's shown in spurts and in a rotational role, because I think last year he was like first half, second half with Ben Powers or something like that. It was like every other. I remember it was like every other drive or like every few drives that they were switching out before he got hurt, because he was kind of in and out of the lineup as a rookie. But he's a guy that, like, if you can take the consistency that you show in those flashes into practice, I feel like he'll earn that spot. And that's the kind of thing that I feel like he really needs to do heading into year 3.
I think there are questions, and this comes up a lot with Harbaugh. It's one of the things he can't stand in a player, which is why it bothers me so much that he was so chips in the pot in terms of drafting him originally. But if he doesn't love people who don't love the game of football, he's just not real big on. And the game obviously always came pretty easy to Cleveland based on his size. True of a lot of college players, and I know you can't coach that. But when you get to the NFL and you get against bigger, stronger men, it's a new challenge, both physically and oftentimes mentally for these guys, just to keep the focus and keep it going. I don't really see any excuse for it, but I've got some expectations for this year I think I want to talk about. So we didn't really define what this means, but I'm going to tell you what it means to me in terms of what a good season and a great season is. For the good season, I'd set a 60th percentile result as far as I would consider it. For a great season, an 80th percentile result. So in both cases, that we're looking at kind of an above average season. but you define it however you want. And tell me, for you, what would make a good season for Ben Cleveland?
I mean, a good season would just, win the starting job. Win the starting job, even if it goes down to the last week of the preseason. Win that job. Prove to this team and to Coach Harbaugh that you deserve that starting left guard spot, and hold on to it. Hold on to it and stay healthy and perform, and then consistently show some of those flashes that you put on tape in the past. Through a full 16, 17 game slate.
So I really went back and forth a little bit in terms of what I would consider a good season. And I'm trying to figure out where I think it will lean out percentile wise or play out percentile wise. And I couldn't, it's like him winning the starting job straight out, no questions asked, kind of puts the job away. That's more than a 60th percentile result based on where the Ravens are right now, I'm afraid. So what I said is he makes it through whatever penance that John Harbaugh has set for him this year. And I don't know what that is. It may be sitting on the game for 4 or 5 years. And he did that with Orlando Brown. If you look back in the past, he's done it with other players as well, sitting them for a period of time. Tim Williams, it didn't work out for the pass rusher. He was unhappy about it, let it be known. And he was gone, in terms of not having a good work ethic that went with that. In terms of other players, it has worked out. I think Orlando Brown is one we'd point to in terms of a guy who was obviously better than James Hurst right from the start of that 2018 season. Mm-hmm. And yet, he had to wait half a season to get his full shot in there. But anyway, it worked out for him, obviously, and he's gone on to great things. In the case of Cleveland, after he makes it through whatever penance, I say he has to be the starter for at least half a season somewhere in the Ravens offensive line. Don't know where that'll be. Don't know if it'll be right guard, left guard, because of injury, because of whatever, but he has to be a starter for some number of games. Obviously, it'd be ideal if it were not due to injury. It would due to his effectiveness. And then the other portion of this is that he's effective enough in that play that there's hope for his future. And the lingering questions about his feet primarily, which I think are where the big issues are with him right now, aren't front and center from where he plays. So, if he plays at left guard, he's going to have to pull a lot for this team. And we can't have an issue where he's tripping over people or he's, Frankenstein-esque in terms of his movement such that he's too slow. His athleticism is at a higher level than Ben Powers. It's at a higher level than Bradley Bozeman by far. And it seems to me a guy like that should be able to learn the technical movements necessary to keep his feet clean and get moving quickly with a good coach like Joe D to work with.
Yeah, and sometimes, athleticism doesn't always translate to on the field play. You have guys that can jump out the gym and throw around weight in the weight room, but when it comes time to playing ball and doing the things that you need to technically succeed at at your craft, some guys just can't make that translation of that power, that speed, that athleticism, to the actual application of what they need to do on the field. I'm not saying that the Cleveland's one of those guys, but sometimes it can take some guys longer than others to, kind of put it all together. Man, you see this guy has the tools, you see the flashes of the potential that he has, but you gotta put it all together. You gotta put it all together and be consistent with it, because the one thing a team won't tolerate is an inconsistent player, because that can lead to injuries and unsound plays and pass protection when you can't get your $255 million quarterback hurt because a guy doesn't know what he's doing, not necessarily knows what he's doing, or can't execute the play properly.
Yeah. I mean, I 100% agree with that point about, it doesn't always translate for players. Unfortunately, Odafe Owe is another player on the Ravens whose athleticism has not translated to as much on-field success as the Ravens would have hoped and clearly gambled on with the draft pick. Still think it could, but, it just in this first 2 seasons so far, it really hasn't paid off in the way the Ravens would like.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he's going to do with Chuck Smith now. having that specialist. We've talked several times about guys getting specialized training on the offseason. He's one of the guys that the best of the best would seek out and help hone their craft. And for him to be on the Ravens staff full time, the investments the Ravens have made on the coaching staff this offseason have me excited, just about as excited as any other player acquisition that they've made. In addition to Todd Monken and Chuck Smith, I'm super excited.
Yeah. It definitely is a very big signing. So let's move on to a great season. What makes a great season for Ben Cleveland?
I mean, I don't put too much stock in Pro Bowls, but establishes himself as one of the upper echelon, like interior offensive lineman guards in the game, and like I said, stay healthy the entire season, and like I said, maybe make a Pro Bowl bid, or if even I mean, a great season to me. Even if you get second team All Pro, that's still that's the it's in the realm of great stellar for me. But I'm just like for a great season, just establishing himself as not just an every game starter, but one of the better interior offensive linemen in the league would be a great season for me in my eyes.
That would certainly be great in my book, but I'd set the bar lower for him just because I think he's not in the greatest position just to start with. And I'll say his starting job is never in serious doubt with his conditioning, his play in camp, and the preseason. So he goes through all that. There's no serious question about him being the starter. Then he has to be effective as a pass blocker. He doesn't have to be great. He just has to be effective enough as a pass blocker. Functional as a puller. Again, I'm not expecting him to be Bradley Bozeman. I'm not expecting him to be any of the other guys the Ravens have had at left guard who've all done a pretty good job despite some pretty modest athleticism. That's all I want from him is basically to be able to fulfill that role. Just be quick enough to do it.
Yeah,
and
I have. Okay. Yeah.
I just the last thing was he needs to demonstrate his power in the run game very thoroughly. I mean, it's his best asset. He's actually fallen backwards in a lot of areas as a pass blocker that he really excelled at Georgia. That's been very frustrating. So I just want to see him, average level of proficiency as a pass blocker, I would accept. But as a run blocker, he's got to be right there helping Linderbaum to create double team magic on the inside.
That was gonna be, but that was in my notes. I was like, regular combo block highlights with Tyler Linderbaum on a weekly basis. I want to see those guys putting guys into the crust of the earth, and and it's kind of like just stacking those pancakes and helping that young center out so that you can both because what people don't understand sometimes is when you a lot of times when you see highlight blocks by a center, unless he's pulling center or guard, unless he's pulling, an open field like Linderbaum was, in that famous Devin White highlight where he's kind of walking the 15 yards downfield. A lot of times the best offensive line highlights are combo blocks or double blocks where the center and the guard both put a guy, or like when I think there's a few times where Linderbaum and Powers kind of really did a great job of blocking DJ Reader for the Bengals, and it's bringing guys open on the left side of the offensive line. So it's like helping Tyler Linderbaum be successful and taking his game to the next level will help him take his game to the next level. And I also wrote down that being Bradley Bozeman-esque on those pull blocks, because I mean, what was it 2020? Every time Lamar had one of those huge runs up the middle, it was always like not Tyler Linderbaum, but Bradley Bozeman, with his arms up in the air, kind of because he got that block to spring him for that big run. So I put down Abib Bradley Bozeman-esque as a pull blocker.
He does have Bozeman's athleticism, so I really want to see that on the field in terms of him making the most out of who he is. I would just love to see that. I did have one other condition. Other thing I want in year 3 is, even though my goals for a great season are fairly modest, let's say he has to have a minimum of about a C grade as I have it in 12 plus games, and no serious questions about him as a starter. If he's not already penciled in as the 2024 starter at the end of 23, this wasn't a great season. It's got to be no question about it. He's the Ravens guy going forward. And maybe they're wondering if Voorhees is actually ready to take over at right guard right away. That's fine, but no question, Cleveland's a solid starter. We got those 4 guys taken care of, kind of thing. Can't have any doubt after 23.
Yeah, that'd be the last one I put in there too. That establish yourself as the clear-cut starter heading into your final season, and maybe even be a candidate for extension this offseason if he shows enough.
Yeah, that's a good point. That'd be exciting because it's certainly the right time for it after year 3. Getting on to the next player, that's kind of a great segue with Justin Madubuike, because he and Broderick Washington both coming out of year 3. I personally think, because they only got one lineman signed, Travis Jones, for 2024, that it would make a lot of sense to have one of those guys signed to it would be hopefully a team friendly and player securing contract for 3 more years, say. And it's a right player, right place situation. I don't really care too much if it's Washington or if it's Madubuike. Madubuike is going to cost more. Washington's going to cost less. But I want them to have one more defensive lineman secured and at a reasonable price for who he is, so that they're not scrambling for defensive linemen next year.
Yeah, and Ken, I'm telling you, man, I got a bad feeling that Madubuike is going to turn into a third-round comp pick in 2025. Man, I think this guy is poised for a huge year coming up this year. I mean, so I don't expect a huge jump in his snaps just because what's his face? Michael Pierce missed the chunk of the majority of the season last year, so he was already seeing a pretty healthy spike in his playing time, playing with Calais Campbell. But now with Campbell gone, I think he won't see a drastic uptick in his snaps this year, but it'll be enough to where like those 5.5 sacks. I mean, dude might push double-digit sacks this year. I mean, I really think he's on an upward trajectory to really break out this year.
This is an interesting point you're bringing up because I have a different angle on Madubuike than you do. He played 59.3% of the snaps last year. That includes the playoffs, to lead all the Ravens defensive linemen. That proved to be too much for him. And if you look at how he played worse in the second half. His pass rushing really stopped. He was missing a lot of tackles in the second half. When he did play well, if you look at a game-by-game basis, if you look at PFF, you look at my notes, whatever you want to look at, he was playing less than 35 snaps and playing well. Part of the problem was Pierce's injury immediately put more pressure on him to play on a lot more run and downs. That needs to stop. Okay, the Ravens have lots of good run defenders between the combination of Pierce, Jones, Washington, and Urban. Those guys all pretty much make their money as run defenders. Jones, maybe he's got something as a pass rusher. We just don't know yet. Washington, maybe he could provide a little more as a pass rusher, though he did pretty decently as a pass rusher last year, but he's primarily a run defender. And Urban, of course, is a great space-denying 5-tech who can occasionally impact the pass, but basically just a guy who does more in your base defense to deny space and create plays for other players. But Madubuike, he is a one-on-one matchup, a stunt nightmare who should be playing passing downs, but needs to have his snaps reduced in total. I don't want to see him on the field for 59.3% of the snaps. I want to see him playing 47% of the snaps and playing at a much higher level of efficiency this year.
I mean, less is always like can lead to like I'm not saying always less often leads to more. I mean, like we saw with Justin Houston last year. You know, when you make that guy that designated pass rusher or just kind of bring him on those passing downs, the efficacy goes up. And but my whole thing is just like given I would say their lack of depth, but like if Travis Jones and Michael Pierce stay healthy this year, like I really think that the mixture of Michael Pierce going down early and Travis Jones not being ready, like at the start of the season, like you were saying, really kind of forced Madubuike to play more early downs early on in the year. And then Jones just never seemed like he was right even after he got back. And he even talked about that recently on an episode of the Lounge podcast on the Ravens Podcast Network. He talked about how, just coming off that injury after having such a strong training camp really kind of threw him off a little bit as a rookie. So year 2 for him, I think the health and the availability of those two guys in the middle will be the key to really kind of unlocking and not unlocking, but freeing up Madubuike to do what he does best, which is get after the passer and exploit those one-on-ones and those stunts and those twists. I think this guy can. I think he can definitely join the double-digit sack club this year.
Oh, it'd be fantastic, obviously, if he did, but I wouldn't put that as the bar for either of these things. I will say this: with Calais Campbell gone, the Ravens need a defensive lineman to emerge as the guy who stays on the field with what will probably be 3 outside linebackers, a kick-in guy and 2 guys who are more traditional outside linebackers. I think Madubuike is the guy the Ravens want it to be, but if Travis Jones outplays him, it could be Travis Jones. If Michael Pierce all of a sudden is pushing the pocket around like he's capable of at times, he could be the guy who stays on and plays more of those downs. So Madubuike, that really needs to be his kind of exclusive turf. And I do feel like they're going to need to scheme ways when it's not just 3rd and long, when it's not an obvious dime situation. They really need to try and scheme ways to do 2 things for him. One is create stunt value for him. He can go over, he can go under. He's got all the ability to do either in the stunt game. So you've got that. But also, he's a guy who is very effective working one-on-one against a guard, in a one-on-one matchup against a guard. It's a lot of three techs. That's really what they live for, is to get those one-on-one matchups. But even if he didn't get that, if you force the defense to completely pay attention to Madubuike and that generates opportunities for others, that's another way to get value from him. But in either case, I think it means he's got to be fresher, more well-rested for those kind of pass rush snaps. And there's kind of a natural way to get him out of there on the lineup on first and some second downs to keep him rested on a snap-by-snap basis. He gets 2 or 3 snaps off in a row fairly regularly.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the increased rotation on the defensive line this year for the Ravens. With Campbell gone, because Campbell's really kind of like a stalwart. He was kind of a guy who almost like never came off the field because he was an elite run defender and still had provided some juice as a pass rusher. But I feel like with Campbell gone, it kind of not creates a void, but allows the guys who are on the team now to kind of do more of what they do best. It's going to allow Michael Pierce and Travis Jones to be those run pluggers and still be able to push the pocket. It's going to allow Justin Madubuike to push the pocket even more and become that, I won't say designated pass rusher on an interior, but kind of, to kind of live more in that specialized role of, like, all right, this guy is going to be our NASCAR package guy. Like you said, the one defensive lineman that stays on the field when they bring on a Jabo and Owe and Bowser. And maybe Houston, if he comes back, who knows?
Yeah, maybe. I'm excited to see it, obviously, if it does happen. Madubuike is a very odd case to me because he's got all the talent that you could hope for in the player. It's not a case of he needs to get better physically at something. It's not even really a case of him needing to change his approach to the game or the way he approaches pass rushing, because I think that's pretty good. And when he's been right and had a very well managed snap count, he's been very good. End of his rookie year, he was terrific. He was really good this last year when he was getting less play time. It's just a matter of usage, and I think the Ravens kind of were forced to overplay him a little bit last year with the time that Campbell missed and the time that Michael Pierce was out. Just ended up being Madubuike was a guy who had to pick up slack for several different players, and some of it was suboptimal. I do feel a little bit like his situation was a little bit similar to Odafe Owe. Owe having to go in and fill in for Bowser at the Sam linebacker position really wasn't a good fit. And it really didn't take advantage of what Owe did well.
Yeah, and I kind of see Madubuike because, like, the proliferation in the salaries for the interior defensive linemen, in particular 3 techniques this offseason, has been like crazy. You're seeing guys getting paid out the wazoo, and I kind of see Madubuike in that similar tier. The guy like Ed Oliver, who recently got paid for the Bills, kind of like that, like not quite undersized, but more slender, athletic interior defensive lineman who's best with less, and could really excel as an interior pass rusher and pocket pusher who can exploit those one-on-one matchup with guards. So I kind of see him as that second tier, like not quite elite. Like I know we're going to get into the good and great season for them, mm-hmm. But I kind of see him in that tier with the guy like Oliver, who's I don't know, like those specialized, or not specialized, but like better fitted at getting after the passer than not saying he can't play the run early downs, because he's had some great plays against the run this past. But he's better utilized, as we've been going back and forth here. He's better utilized on those later downs, those obvious passing downs, when he can really turn up the heat.
Yeah, Oliver is a very reasonable comp. Obviously, the 9th overall selection in 2019, so he's a year behind him. But yeah, definitely a guy who's had maybe a reasonably similar career in terms of his effectiveness. Definitely not at the top end of the entire league, and it'd be an interesting one. Let me ask you this before we get into a good and great season. If you extend him right now, before the season, what's your price on him? And let's just toss it out there. It's a 3-year extension, and I'm really looking for AAV here, I think, in terms of what you'd be willing to pay.
I given where see, that's the thing, man. He's I don't think he would sign an extension right now, just because I think he knows he's in store for a bigger year. Because like if you look at his stats and his production, it's been climbing each year he's been in the league. And so I think he's going to be in store. But I kind of slide him like underneath what Oliver got. What Oliver got, I don't think they're going to get him any. He's going to be at AAV in the double digits. I believe. I just don't think he's going to settle for anything less than I don't know. Like I said, without looking at the top of the defensive tackle market, but a guy like Ed Oliver, I'll pull it up on Spot Track right now. He's a guy that I feel like he's gonna get probably somewhere in right underneath that, if not that, if he ends up having a better season than Ed Oliver. So right now, Ed Oliver's AAV is like 17 million. Now I don't think the Ravens are going to be willing to pay that, but no. I think if they get him, if they can get him signed early to something underneath that, somewhere in like maybe like the 11 to 12, 13 range. But even then, I think Madubuike will feel like he's lowballing himself, given that what he's seen guys at his position with similar production, or at least on the same track, have gotten paid this offseason. So I'm not saying he's as good as gone, but man, it's going to be hard to keep him.
Yeah, that pretty much makes him out of their price range. I think they're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices after this year. It's Zeitler will be a difficult sacrifice, but they're going to have to make it, I'm afraid. It's better you got to make sure you're not holding the old maid at the wrong time. And the wrong time to hold it is at the beginning of a contract. So you don't want to have a guy who suddenly gets old at the beginning of a contract. And that really, I don't think it's going to make sense to sign Zeitler for what he might make somewhere else. The Ed Oliver contract, I mean, it's a lot of money. And that guy's only 25 still. So I can see the reason why, Buffalo might want to pay it. But it also, that's a cornerstone contract, no doubt about it. I don't see Madubuike as a cornerstone guy. I see him as more of I think if the Ravens could get him for about 3 years and $25 million added to his contract, that might be what they think they could afford at the outside. I don't see him at $35 million, for example, for 3 years. I think that would be too high.
Yeah, that's why I felt like I got a bad feeling. Like if they extend either guy's probably going to be Brody, because he's the guy that's the Ravens like really almost take care of their underrated guys. Guys who aren't the brand names, or may not average 5, 6, 7 sacks a year on defense, but those gritty guys. Because every time you hear a Ravens defensive lineman talk about it, they talk about how Brody's like, Brody can do it all. Brody's this, Brody's that. They almost talk about him more than they talk about Madubuike, just because he's such an underrated player nationally. But inside, people who follow the team and know the team and hear everything coming out of the castle know that Ravens are really high on Brody, and that he's a guy that's probably going to be the prime candidate to get extended between the two of them, just because Madubuike, like I said, he plays a more high. I wouldn't say plays a more high profile position, because interior pass rush is becoming more of a premium across the league. But he's a guy that's kind of been there, done that, as far as like putting up the notable sack numbers for an interior defensive lineman. And he himself is only 25 years old. I'm not sure exactly how old Broderick is. I can pull that up, but I just don't believe that Madubuike is long for Baltimore, sadly. Brody. Yes, Brody's already 26, and he'll be 27 in December. So.
Okay, well, obviously a couple of years older than Oliver was when he got paid. Nothing in terms of trajectory or snap count or their play to date would suggest that Washington is going to get Ed Oliver money. So, yes, I agree with you. I think it's probably the more likely signing. You started earlier with the notion that you think it'd be terrible that Justin Madubuike is going to leave town as a third-round comp pick. I actually think that's probably the best situation for the Ravens.
I don't think it's terrible. I said I got a feeling, like a bad, like when I say bad feeling, that I'm gonna regret it. But I got a strong feeling that he's not long for this team and for this city.
First of all, I'll buy into your plan A right away. I'll sign up for it right now in terms of the Ravens losing for a third-round comp pick, and he has the kind of year that entails, to earn that contract. But let's talk about what a good and a great season is for Madubuike. Do you want to go first or second on these?
I'll go first. So a good season, kind of like what he did last year. Like I said, as far as his stats and effectiveness, like 5.5 sacks, just like I would say like running in the back, but like kind of same thing what he did. Like, so he was really good last year. That to me, that's a good season. Guys, he's going to be available for most, if not every game. Like unquestioned starter. Kind of helps take over that Calais Campbell role as far as not only leadership but also like from on the field standpoint, because he's a guy that I feel like the Ravens are going to lean heavy on this year, not just on the field but also off the field.
That's a reasonable set of things. I approached it from a different angle because we're talking about a 60th percentile season here. So this would be a little bit above average. What I'd say is his run roll is limited. I think it's, again, very important in this, but he plays on the bulk of passing downs. I do think that will happen, that he'll likely be the guy the Ravens turn to for that, assuming he's healthy, of course, and that he generates consistent, solid pressure without a second half wear down. And again, that is so important. The Ravens have got to find a way to figure out how to keep him fresh by game and fresh for the season, both as he goes through. So to me, that's a good season. Doesn't have to generate a ton of sacks, just has to generate some pressure, some attention, something that helps some other players in the process. And it's certainly a little bit of pressure and some ability to win one-on-one matchups with that. But that would be a good season to me.
Yeah, sometimes I feel like don't remember. I love sacks, and I place a high volume on them as well. Sometimes when it comes with interior pass rushers, sometimes pressures can be just as, if not even more valuable than sacks, because you're disrupting that play up the middle immediately. You're forcing the quarterback to roll out and creating sacks for others, or creating like negative plays or throwaways. So sometimes I feel like for interior, sometimes you say like, man, why does this team playing this guy? He only get this defensive tackle all this money. He only got like 3 sacks or 4 sacks. Well, if you look at his pressure rate and his pressure numbers, like those things are just as gold, if not even more, than sacks.
Yeah, they are, and a lot of people will tell you, PFF included, that they're more indicative of what's going to happen the following year. It's a more stable statistic than sacks, and so I'd like to see that from Madubuike. I'll go ahead with great season if that's okay. To me, a great season for Madubuike, and it's out there. He could do it, and this would go with your original, hope that he might go for a third-round comp pick, is he becomes a voracious pass rush presence, regardless of his snap burden. And I'd say if he does that, it doesn't matter whether he's playing a lot of run snaps or a few run snaps. What's going to really matter is he getting it done as a pass rusher in those snaps? And that includes a lot of success with stunts and schemed one-on-one wins. I do believe that McDonald is a guy who will figure out a way to use Madubuike optimally in this next year. And particularly with Campbell gone, it's going to mean a lot to see how it goes. Pressure exists, for defensive coordinators when they lose a lot of key position groups. And one group that I come back to looking at, the 1996 Ravens, not only did they lose a whole bunch of defensive linemen, but they were forced in season to switch from a 4-3 to a 3-4 defense because of all the injuries they had. That, it can get that bad. Now, the Ravens in years since, with their rotational system and the general ability to find body types they like out there on the street, have not been forced into that kind of a situation since, but it can be really bad. In Madubuike's case, anything that really pressures his snap count upwards, I'm opposed to. I think the Ravens need to look at it very carefully and say, how do we need to address him playing too much on first and second down such that he's not available at his top efficiency on third down? So the last part of that is that he draws attention of defenses and improves the chances for other pass rushers in addition to these one-on-one wins.
Yeah, that was kind of like your last point was kind of like my main point was take his pass rush to the next level and also create more opportunities for others by taking this to the next level. Because if he racks up like say 7 sacks for the first 11 weeks, something crazy like that, teams are going to pay a lot more attention to him, and then he's going to free up more guys like Travis and Brody and Pierce, and even some of the outside guys, or some of the guys on the outside who might kick it inside, like a Tavius Robinson or a Dafe Owe. So if he turns up, that means there's going to be more attention on him and less on his other people. Kind of the tide that raises all ships, kind of thing.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So Travis Jones is obviously a key player for the Ravens defensive line over the next several years because he's the only one who's signed. But in terms of what the Ravens get out of him this year, do you want to see him getting a lot of those 3-tech snaps on early downs that would have gone to Madubuike last year, or might have gone to Washington as well? But so a combination of Pierce and Jones, I am absolutely foaming at the mouth to see that this year in terms of how that could perform in terms of early down pass rush. And in particular, Pierce pushes the pocket effectively, but I really want to see Travis Jones get one-on-one opportunities versus the guard as a 3-tech.
Yeah, and that was gonna be my next thing. My next point I wanted to make. I'd love to see Travis Jones, like say, because remember a few years back when they did that with Brandon Williams and Michael Pierce.
Pierce, yeah.
Yeah, they wanted them both on the field at the same time, so they swapped Brandon Williams to three tech, and then Pierce stayed at nose. So seeing something similar like that, I think that was the year that Brandon Williams might have made the Pro Bowl as an alternate or something like that. So I feel like the guy, a guy like Travis Jones, he's capable of playing multiple spots across the defensive interior front. I wouldn't put him at five technique, but he's a guy who's big enough, strong enough, sturdy enough to play three technique at a high level, especially for those early rundowns where teams are going to be trying to run at, especially in the AFC North. When you look around the teams that the Ravens are going to be playing, the Bengals put more of an emphasis on the run last season. The Steelers always believe in kind of like run first thing, even though they got some more weapons for Kenny Pickett this offseason. And then the Browns with Nick Chubb, that's going to be a tough thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, looking forward to it. And two very key players for the Ravens. Josh, really appreciate you coming on and talking about them. And I think this was an interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to the rest of the series. Tell folks where they can find your work online.
Yes, you can find all my Ravens stuff at Heavy on Ravens for Heavy Incorporated under their sports section. And I also work full time at the Anchorage Daily News up here in Anchorage, Alaska, where I was born and raised. And you can also find me on Twitter. Talk to me on Twitter about anything and all things Ravens, man, at Josh Reed 907. 907.
All right, outstanding, Josh. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, there's still time this off season. Hit me up with a DM on Twitter. I'd love to hear from you, and I'll get back to you really quickly. Josh, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me as always, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.